Hello, welcome back to Learning Curves. I'm Anastasia, and I know I say this a lot, but I'm really excited about today's topic. I have been planning this video for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's finally time to film this. Today we are going to talk about birth. I am such a fangirl of birth, and there are so many aspects to birth that I would love to talk about on this channel. If there are pieces of birth that you'd like for me to talk about in future videos, please comment those below, and I will happily oblige. But today, specifically, I want to talk about why it's important to feel comfortable in your birthing location and why I am choosing a home birth. I am currently 39 weeks pregnant today with my second baby. And yeah, we're going to talk about it. I do have a couple disclaimers. The first is I am not a healthcare professional. I am not a birth worker. I am just a fangirl of birth. I've done a lot of my own research from reading books, from watching documentaries, from talking with women about their labor experiences, from talking with birth workers. So this is just all information I've collected. These are my conclusions I've come to, and I encourage you, if you are so inclined, to look into these topics yourself and see what information you come up with. The next is not really a disclaimer, more so a warning, I guess. We're going to be talking about birth. So I'm going to be talking about body parts, a lot of female body parts that we don't talk about publicly very often. And, well, maybe you don't talk about them publicly pretty often. As somebody who likes to talk about birth, I make people uncomfortable talking about them all the time. Also, I'm going to be talking about, because I think it is important to the topic of birth, we're going to be talking about how you get pregnant. Partially. So if any of that feels inappropriate for young ears and you are around young ears, then I encourage you to either watch this video later or put in some earbuds or go away from the little ears. Whatever feels good to you. Whatever works. This is weird. Let's just get into it. I think the number one most important factor for birth is that you trust your care provider. The level of trust you should have in that person should be very, very high, because regardless of how you birth, at some point you will not be in full control of things. Whether you get an epidural and can't use the bottom half of your body, or you have a cesarean birth, in which case you're completely cut open, of course, you are at someone else's mercy in that situation, or if you have an unintervened or an unmedicated birth, at some point you're going to be pretty overcome with the experience of it, that you're going to be at the mercy of whoever's around you. And it's important that you trust the people around you to make choices that you want for you and your body and your baby. Because we want oxytocin, and we do not want cortisol, stress, or adrenaline, stress. We don't want those. We want to feel comfortable in our birthing locations, because cortisol and adrenaline are not going to do us any favors in labor as far as moving it expediently, or lightening our experience of our pain sensory. However, the absence of those and the abundance of oxytocin, the love hormone, really being able to settle into that and feel as comfortable as you can, and as empowered as you can, is really going to help things move along. So it's really important to feel good about your birthing location. The three main planned birthing locations are hospital, birth center, and home. I know women who, at home, with planning, with working with midwives, just wouldn't feel as comfortable as they would in a hospital situation. I've seen the magic that a white coat has for people. With both of my parents being doctors, I've seen people look at doctors like magicians, and there isn't that magic for me for physicians. Strangely enough, or interestingly enough, there is that magic for me with midwifery care. When I think about midwives and doulas, I do think there is something kind of magical about them. And so for my first pregnancy, I sought out these midwives who work out of a birth center, but they do home births, and they also have privileges at a local hospital. So I had all three locations as options, while maintaining these same care providers. I had a fibroid that throughout that first pregnancy grew to be 10 centimeters in diameter, which is roughly the size of a grapefruit. It's harmless, but it's big. This pregnancy, it's about 5 centimeters, 5 by 3, so about half the size. You know, the uterus contracting is a very important part of labor, right? Contractions, we all know about contractions. And with that fibroid, that mass being on my uterus, they didn't know whether or not my uterus was going to be able to effectively contract, which for labor progression can be a challenge, but is more of a safety concern postpartum. After you deliver the baby and the placenta, you continue contracting and your uterus contracts down smaller and smaller to help mitigate the bleeding, because there is some bleeding. I have double the blood in my body right now than I usually do. So bleeding is a normal, healthy part of birth. Excessive bleeding is a problem. So since they were not sure how my uterus was going to contract, and that took me out of the low risk category, they made the decision that I needed to birth in the hospital. I was able to have no interventions for that labor and delivery experience. After delivery, after I had delivered her, I'm not sure if it was before I delivered the placenta or not, but afterwards they did give me some Pitocin, which is the synthetic version of Oxytocin, which is the love hormone, the labor hormone, and that's what you want in abundance in your body, but it can also intensify contractions. Oh my gosh, I want to tell you about all the birth things. I want to talk about all the birth things, and I'm really having a hard time limiting the scope of this video. Focus. So my first birth was an unintervened birth. I like to normalize that. I like to make it less scary, because it can be intimidating for sure, but I think that it sounds terrifying to a lot of women. And there were moments of it that were scary because it's big, but it's not scary in the way it's expressed to us. As you know, people talk about labor as a 10 on the pain scale, as this is the worst, this is surgery without medication. Like, there are also times that I try not to mention that piece, or I try to specifically say that I had no interventions, because people, it seems like for a lot of people, there are 2 types of birth. I mean, aside from, of course, cesareans. There's where you have an epidural and they think it's easy street, and when you have no epidural and they think, oh my gosh, what are you doing? There's no easy way around birth. It's hard. It's hard any way you slice it. You know, it's called labor for a reason, and even when you have an epidural, it's really hard. In fact, I think sometimes it can be a lot harder than not having an epidural, and that's part of why I made the choices that I made. For my first birth, I will happily share a birth story video if you're interested in that birth story. But suffice it to say, it was a pretty quick birth. My first sign of labor happened at 11 p.m. and my daughter was born at 7:30 in the morning, 7:36 in the morning. Since we had no issues with that first delivery, I am cleared for home birth. I was not cleared for about a week because I was anemic, and that's a concern. That makes me not low risk. But the anemia is gone, my iron's back up, my hemoglobin's back up, so we are back on for home birth. I just have to have this baby before 42 weeks. So as long as I have her between now and, well, 37 and 42 weeks, we're good to have her here. So I definitely want to talk about epidurals and pain, because I think a lot of people get hung up on these pieces. I think you can get an epidural and have a really, really challenging birth experience. And I think you can not get an epidural and have a relatively easy birth experience. I don't think that epidurals make labor easy, but I think that we're told that they do. I think that, and I think the world thinks that they do. Ask any woman who has had an epidural, maybe not any woman, but just about any woman, whether or not labor was hard. It's not a get out of jail free card. They're still working really hard, and it is really challenging. And in some ways I think it's worse, because I want to make a distinction between pain and suffering. I also want to make a distinction between pain that's caused by injury or illness and pain that's caused by pushing yourself. I can't believe I'm only now just saying this, but birth is a natural, healthy, normal function of the human body. Nothing is wrong. Your body is supposed to give birth. You know, if you're a woman, a pregnant woman, your body is supposed to do this. That is a thing you are supposed to do. I can't think of any other reason we go to the hospital for something we're supposed to do, for something our body is supposed to do. We don't go to the hospital to poop. We don't go to the hospital to get pregnant unless you have issues with fertility. There's nothing wrong with you when you're in labor. It's a natural, healthy function of the human body. And I think that having someone there to tell you that, regardless of the choices you want to make for birth, is indispensable. And that's where a doula comes in. I'll make another video about doulas. I can't go into it now. I want to so badly, but I can't. Having someone next to you, having a Sherpa, you know, say, this is normal. Or when someone comes in and says, here are the things we want to, you know, someone from the hospital comes in and says, here are all the things we want to do, they can say, here are your options. You know, they can kind of translate and say, maybe here are some questions we should ask. You know, if you think about going to the gym and really pushing yourself, like, you know, doing as many squats as you can and your legs feel like they're going to give out and you can't do another one, you're going to fall, but you keep going. That's kind of what labor is. That's kind of birth. Except for that your body's just doing the squats. It's not, people think about it like an injury. They think about it like something excruciating. They think about it like an injury and like suffering, as opposed to thinking about it as being productive and something you're choosing that is bringing you closer to meeting your baby. It's getting work done. It's labor. It's you're laboring. You are getting that work done to meet your baby. And birth, again, I refer you to the beginning of this video. Birth, however feels, I guess it'd be this way. The beginning of this, whatever. Birth, however, makes you feel comfortable. That's super important, is that you feel safe and good in your birth decisions. I do not judge any woman on her birth decisions. I don't. Largely because of how that physically manifests. Again, I refer you to the hormones conversation. You know, if you do not feel good about the choices, if you feel pressured into having an unmedicated birth, and then you feel scared and you get that adrenaline and that cortisol, which most women feel scared at some point. But if it's because you don't really want that, you're not doing yourself any favors. You're doing yourself a disservice by making choices that aren't right for you. So yeah, people focus a lot on the pain piece. And the thing is, like, yeah, it's hard and yeah, there's pain, but you can do it. You're made to do it. Your body is made to do it. And it's just like the hardest workout of your life. It's just so empowering. And I think there are more women who would make that choice. I don't think that everyone would. And I think that we should all be able to make whatever choices we want for our birth experience. But I think that if all women knew what I knew, some of them would make different choices. I think a lot of them would make different choices. So now I want to talk about home specifically, because you can have an unmedicated birth experience in a hospital. But I want to talk about home specifically. And here, if you are currently pregnant and set on a hospital birth, I encourage you to come back and watch the rest of this at a later point in time. I don't want to be a part of spreading fear, because I don't think that we need to have fear around birth. If you are scared of birth, if you do have concerns, the two things I encourage you to do are really, really consider a doula. You know, you wouldn't climb Everest without a Sherpa. And I think that doulas, I know doulas who have been hired for scheduled cesarean births. You can hire a doula for any kind of birth. It doesn't have to be, you know, a super hippie home birth. You know, it can be any birth experience. I think that I really advocate for doulas. And feel free to interview a few and find one that you really enjoy. And also, pretty much every birth worker, outside of hospital birth worker that I have experienced, every doula, midwife, they all have something in their paperwork that I've signed that says, please do not let money be a reason you don't hire me. So if you do have financial concerns, there are so many birth workers who work with people who have financial hardships. And yeah, I just think that doulas are incredible investments. So that's one. And then the second thing I think you should do, and this part's free, is I think you should look up positive birth stories. I think that you should go onto YouTube and search positive birth story hospital or positive birth story whatever, something specific about your birth if you want. Any positive birth story, I think. Even if, you know what, read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. The whole beginning of the book is birth stories. Even if you don't want for yourself an unmedicated birth, even if you don't want an out-of-hospital birth, I think that hearing those stories, getting that positivity into you, and, you know, hearing there are women who on a farm in Tennessee, I think they're in Tennessee, give birth in a cabin, you know, just surrounded by supportive women, including midwives, that they do it. They just do it. You do it. And it can be so freaking cool. Yeah. So if you are pregnant and planning a hospital birth and are scared, consider a doula and go seek out positive birth stories and stop watching this video if you're definitely having a hospital birth. Okay? I think some people think that for midwifery care, it's just like, you know, they think that she comes in with like a chicken to sacrifice and some sage to burn and a shaman and hopes for the best. You know, that's not what happens. It's really not what happens. Midwives are trained birth workers. They are incredibly well informed. I think some people think that when you have a midwife, you're getting substandard care, and I think you're getting so much more. You know, I think a lot of people look at home birth as a big risk, and I see a lot of risks with hospital birth. I've heard that the epidural rate is anywhere from 60 to 90% of women have an epidural, which is, you know, again, can be fine. But once you have one intervention, you are so much more likely to have continued interventions. When you have a midwife delivery and when you have a home birth, they follow you around. Where do you want to move? Because they trust that my body is going to tell us what I need. The pain in labor can really help tell you, okay, this is not a great position. We need to change something. This is not, you know, you're supposed to listen to your body. Your body is telling you what to do. Your body is telling you how to bring this baby forth. And again, yes, you have the midwife there who is intermittently checking baby on a Doppler and, you know, is there to watch and ensure that everything is progressing normally and healthily. And if anything is concerning, to help you address how, you know, do you think we should transfer, or are we good to stay home, or let's try a different position? Why don't you get something to eat? Why don't you get something to drink? Why don't you go pee? You know, there to help guide you through it. But really, I get to labor how my body says I should labor, and I get to have my baby how my body says I should have my baby, and in my home. And then I get to go to sleep in my home with my baby and not go anywhere, and not worry about people taking my baby off to the nursery every, you know, 3 hours or whatever it was they did. They took her like 10 times within like 24 hours. I don't understand. I think that the two things that are bummers, I guess, about home birth, it's not about home birth, it's just about the situation, is that in that documentary, Why Not Home, one of the women mentions that people think that we are prioritizing the experience over the outcome. And there's so many people who said all you care about is a healthy mom and a healthy baby. And I feel like for the baby going in part, for sex, that's like saying all you care about is getting pregnant in the end. I care about how I get pregnant, and, you know, I care about how this baby comes out of my body. And I really do think that feeling as positive as I did or could about my first birth experience really did help make that birth experience a smoother one. I do think that's true. And yeah, I think that because I felt positive about it, it was positive. You know, if you don't feel good about how baby's going in, you're not going to feel good about it. And if you don't feel good about how baby's coming out, you're not going to feel good about it. But because people look at home birth as riskier than hospital birth, which again, I think those risks are very different. I think that you know, oh yeah, I mentioned the epidural rate is somewhere between like 60 and 90%. The cesarean rate is like 30%. It was a third, I think, and now I think it's gone down to 31 or something. But that's crazy. And even everybody agrees that's high. And in fact, the United States of America is one of the out of the developed countries, or, you know, whatever, out of the first world countries, one of the riskiest places to give birth. Again, think about all the traumatic stories that we hear. Think about, do you know how many women say, my baby would have died, I would have died, my baby would have died? Which I do. I want to every time be like, okay, but what were the interventions that led to that happening, because maybe I think I don't think we're getting it right in hospitals. I don't think all that matters is a healthy baby and a healthy mom. I think that's the bare minimum. I think that is the bare minimum. And I think you can have that at home. And I think you can hope for a whole lot more than that. And I do. And that's a big part of why I want a home birth. Because I know my body can do it. Not just because it's done it, but because I know it can do it. I know it can. And I know how good it felt. Not only how strong I felt, how empowered I felt, how invincible I felt, but just like physically. I mean, I was sore the next day. I mean, my body was pretty sore the next day and the day after that, but oh, what a high. I don't know if this is a direct quote from Why Not Home, but you know, I know that if something were to happen in a hospital environment, one of the really, really rare things that can threaten my life or my baby's life, again, really rare things. I know that if that happened in a hospital environment, I would get a lot of sympathy. But I think if that happened in a home birth environment, I would get a lot of judgment. Even if the outcome would have been the same in the hospital, there are a lot of people who I feel like have indicated that I'm being selfish by wanting a home birth. Again, because it seems like I'm prioritizing the experience over the outcome. I don't think that's the case. I think that this is the best decision for myself and my baby, because I think that there are certain things that hospitals tend to push women towards that are not choices I want, that I think do increase risks in the labor experience and delivery. I wish that they didn't have to feel so separate. You know, I wish that it didn't have to feel like OBs are over here and midwives are over here, home birth, you know, hospitals over here and home births over here. I wish that they could be more fluid and, you know, respectful of their differences, but their through line. And there is some of that. You know, there's an obstetrician that my midwife works closely with, and that the previous midwives that they had an obstetrician that they worked really closely with, the midwives I saw for my first pregnancy, where if they saw something weird, they would refer you to that physician. So I saw an OB a few times for my first pregnancy because of the fibroid, because they were like, well, this is outside of normal things, so we're going to send you to this guy. He was really respectful of the difference between midwifery and obstetrics, that, you know, obstetrics is, they're surgeons. They're really skilled for when things are abnormal and addressing those situations. Whereas midwives, I think for all the rest of the times, are just invaluable, miraculous, beautiful, special women. I think if there was more respect for the natural birth process in hospitals, it would be a very different situation. When I had that unmedicated experience in the hospital, there were some people who championed it. There was one labor and delivery nurse in particular who really was a champion for it, but there were a lot of other people who were like, I forgot you can walk. One of the nursing students seemed really annoyed by the fact that I could move and that I wasn't just lying still on a bed so she could sit there with her Doppler for 20 minutes. There are women who, you know, something in their labor changes and they decide they want to transfer to a hospital because they've been, you know, laboring for a long time, or they're just really tired, or whatever, something happens. And if there was more respect for the natural labor process and for home birth and for midwifery care within hospitals, I think that that could feel like a much smoother transition. It just wouldn't feel like a big deal. If you transfer from a home birth, it's looked at as a failed home birth. That language is used, a failed home birth, instead of just a transition, instead of just something changed, I didn't want to do it anymore, or, you know, I changed my mind, or, you know, so many transfers from home to hospital are non-emergent. I remember our very, very, very first ever prenatal appointment for my first pregnancy. I remember the midwife saying, you know, 1/3 of first-time moms transfer to a hospital due to exhaustion. You're tired, your body gives out. You're not certain how to conserve your energy, which again, a doula can help with that. I feel like we should have like a doula can help with that counter. I think birth is big and challenging and beautiful. Yeah, I just think it can be incredible. And I think that I want to empower more women to inform themselves and make choices that will make them feel empowered in their labor experience, so we can have more positive birth stories, so we can, you know, instead of the way that we meet our babies being something that we're scared of. I mean, it is, they're gonna be fear at certain points. It can be intimidating, but that doesn't need to happen traumatically and as hugely as it does happen for so many women. You know, like it's something, when you haven't experienced it, it can feel scary. But yeah, I want to be a part of more women having more positive birth experiences, because it can be so cool. Also, I've thought about doing a series that's like Learning Curves After Dark, where we like hang out and talk about maybe a more adult subject, and I like have a glass of wine or something. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in after this freeze up. Yeah, let me know if this is weird that we're talking after hours, or if it's not. I'll try and figure out some rig that doesn't show you my eBay lights. Yeah, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please let me know in the comments, because all I want to do is talk about birth forever and ever. Let me know something that you learned in this video. Comment something below that you didn't know, or maybe are surprised to hear about home birth or anything. I guess I didn't really talk about body parts too much, did I? That's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like this video and please consider subscribing. I'll see you next time. Bye!